Welcome everyone to this 46th in a series of classes on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy, hosted by the Stanford Hindu Students Association and presented by Swami Tattwamayanandaji of the Vedanta Society of Northern California, San Francisco, where all the classes are archived at sfvedanta.org. If you're watching on the Zoom stream live, please mute yourselves during the address, and then we'll moderate a question and answer following the Swami's address, at which time we'll announce a queue, and you can unmute yourselves and interact with the Swami at that time. If you're watching on the live YouTube feed, then if you post your questions in the live chat, we will monitor that and scan for those questions and ask those questions for you during the interaction. And if you're watching later on the recordings, you can also reach the Swami and the Vedanta Society at sfvedanta.org, where there's contact information. So thank you very much for joining us, and welcome and pranams, Swami Tattwamayanandaji.
Thank you, Bobby. So now we are beginning. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharmasrupini avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. We are continuing this discussion on RāMANUJA'S and this system of Vedanta philosophy known as Viśiṣṭādvaita. So, as I mentioned during one of the previous sessions, RāMANUJA himself did not coin this expression Viśiṣṭādvaita. In answer to one of the listeners' questions, I made it clear in the previous session that RāMANUJA is not the one who started calling the system Viśiṣṭādvaita. It is actually Viśiṣṭādvaita Chit Achit Viśiṣṭā. Maybe Guna Viśiṣṭā, because Chit and Achit. Chit means the living beings, and Achit, the empirical world and different objects called Jagat. And Brahman is, according to RāMANUJA, is Vishnu Narayana, is a monotheistic divine being with some attributes, all the auspicious attributes, powers, with the indweller in all beings. So it is Advaita in the sense that it accepts one reality or unity, but at the same time it is Viśiṣṭādvaita, because that reality itself evolves to parinama into this empirical world and different objects in this empirical world, and also different living beings or jivas. So maybe according to some scholars, the first person who gave the designation Viśiṣṭādvaita was the commentator. His name is Sudarshana Suri, who wrote a commentary called Sutra Prakashika. It is a commentary on RāMANUJA's commentary on Brahma Sutra, which is called Sri Bhashyam. So in that respect, he may be the one who can be called, who may be credited with the authorship of the expression Viśiṣṭādvaita. But we have to remember, it may be, there's a misunderstanding among some scholars, maybe misrepresentation, so to speak, that Advaita is also Viśiṣṭādvaita. It is Maya Viśiṣṭādvaita. This is a totally wrong misconception, because Advaita is not Viśiṣṭā, it is not conditioned, it is not qualified by Maya, because Maya is not a category in Advaita Vedanta. Maya is only an explanation of the mystery of the perfect, permanent, absolute reality Brahman appearing to have become this world. So how do you explain this mysterious phenomenon of our mistaking a rope for a snake, or the absolute reality being perceived in the form of this empirical pluralistic world? So that mystery is being explained away by using this technique of Maya. I made it clear in innumerable sessions in the previous section. So just I wanted to make this clear, because Viśiṣṭādvaita can be called Viśiṣṭādvaita with all justification, because it is Advaita conditioned or qualified by Chit and Achit, which are guna. So we can call it Guna Viśiṣṭādvaita, we can say. Guna. So conditioned by gunas. It is just by way of recuperating, just repeating some of the things that I made clear at the beginning. Now coming back to the subject. Now I mentioned this earlier, that in RāMāNUJA'S system, Brahman is the absolute reality, and that Brahman is the source of evolution. It evolves and it becomes, it really becomes, that's an important thing, not that it appears to have become, it really becomes through evolution, through change, real change, it becomes this world. Like, for example, the seed, oil seeds become the oil. From oil, seed, from seeds you get oil. In fact, the oil cannot go back to the seed form, because the seed has really become, the change is real, it has become oil. On the other hand, if you go to Advaita, the metaphor will be different. Say, for example, clay has become a clay pot. In fact, before the clay pot came into existence, it was clay. And when the clay pot is sitting on your table, still it is clay. And when it is broken, again it goes back to clay. So this appearance, the clay appears to have become the pot. Why it's called appear? It is there. It has a real form. We call it clay pot. You may call it a pot. It is there. But the nama and rupa, the name and the form, cannot exist independent of clay. So even if the clay pot is sitting in front of you, even if you're drinking water with the clay pot, still it is only clay. Then the clay cannot be used for drinking water. That's because it has not taken this form, so it has not got a new name, a pot. But the nama and rupa are superimposed upon the clay. But in the case of RāMāNUJA, it is different. The world is real, and it has got a distinct entity, but it is not independent of Ishvara. So also jivas, the jivas and jagat, different living beings, and called the soul, so to speak, or different objects in this external world called achit. They are distinct from Ishvara, Vishnu Narayana or Brahman, because RāMāNUJA'S Brahman is Saguna Brahman with the name Vishnu Narayana, with certain forms and qualities and characteristics, and all auspicious qualities, etc. So, the world and jivas are dependent upon Vishnu Narayana, but still they are distinct and different. So that's why it is called Chit Achit Viśiṣṭā. And this world of different objects and the jivas, living beings called Chit, different manifestations of soul. In this world, they constitute the body of Brahman. But Brahman is not affected by all these plurality of different entities in this world. One may ask this question, in that case, how it is different from Bheda, 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 Bheda. Achintya Bheda, Bheda is a system of philosophy attributed to the Vaishnava system associated with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Baladeva was a later commentator who wrote a commentary on Brahma Sutras in the light of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. And the system is called Achintya Bheda Bheda, or inconceivable, difference and non-difference combined, so to speak. So in that case, you can say Ramanuja system also can be called Bheda Bheda, because on the one hand, different objects in this external world and different jivas, they are different Bheda from Ishvara. At the same time, they are not independent, because Brahman or Ishvara is the only independent entity. Chit and Achit, jivas and external world, are not independent. So you can call it Bheda Bheda, but Viśiṣṭādvaitins won't agree with that, because Bheda and Abheda cannot exist together. So they would say it's a contradiction in terms. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came long after Ramanuja. So in many of the dialectical discussions, this is the answer they gave. Now, one important thing to remember, and this is very interesting. Ramanuja strongly refutes Shankaracharya's projecting of the concept of Maya by way of explaining Brahman appearing to have become this pluralistic world. Remember, not really become, but appearing. Why? Like clay appears to have become a pot. Why only appears? Because if you break the clay, so if you break the clay pot, it goes back to clay. Therefore, it has not really become. But oil cannot go back to its seed form. This olive oil, it cannot go back to olive form. It is just undergone a complete real change. It's called parinama. So both Advaitins and Viśiṣṭādvaitins accept one important theory of causation or change in Vedantic tradition called Satkaryavada, which in short, which essentially says that the effect pre-exists in cause. Like for example, the oil pre-exists in oil seed, or maybe the clay pot pre-exists in clay. So both the real change and apparent change, as in the case of clay becoming clay pot, a real change, as in the case of oil seeds becoming oil, both come under the category of one important doctrine, theory of causation called Satkaryavada, which means the effect pre-existing in cause. According to Advaitins, the cause really doesn't become the effect, but appears to have become the effect. But according to Ramanuja and according to Sankhya philosophers also, who came long before Ramanuja. So according to Sankhya philosophers also, it's a real change. The absolute reality, the prakriti, the matter, have really become this external world. Mahatattva, Ahankara, and the Tanmatras and Panchamahabhutas and other things. So this is an important thing to remember. So Ramanuja doesn't agree with the Advaitins' view of Maya. Why? Because he says Brahman or Ishvara has become this world and the jivas. Real change called parinama. The real change is called parinama in Vedantic tradition, and the apparent change is called vivarta in Vedantic tradition. In parinama or real change, both have got equal status equal status from an ontological point of view, because the oil seed is as real and distinct from oil. They both have the same entity, both can exist independent of each other. But at the same time, the clay pot cannot exist independent of clay. You take all the clay from a clay pot, there will be no pot left. You take all the gold from a golden ring or golden necklace, there will be no necklace or ring left. So they don't have independent existence. They are mutually, only one thing can exist. One appearing to have become all these different pluralistic entities. This is an important thing, which means Ramanuja refuses to accept the concept of Paramarthika, Vyavaharika, Pradibhasika, Asat, these four perspectives in Vedanta. I shall try to explain. It's very interesting, from a philosophical point of view, it's very interesting. According to Vedanta, Paramarthika, the absolute reality, is one permanent reality, which is devoid of any kind of change. It doesn't come into existence because it's always there. It doesn't cease to exist because it will always be there. It doesn't grow. It cannot be called existing because existing implies a transition or a change from a state of empirical non-existence into a state of empirical existence. So you cannot say Brahman exists because Brahman is always there. It doesn't grow, it doesn't evolve, it doesn't decay, it doesn't die. It's called Shatvigaras, 6 changes, which actually was stated. This idea came for the first time in the 6th century work called Yaska's Niruktam. Niruktam is actually an etymological work which describes the meaning of many of the expressions and words used in Rigveda Samhita. It's a very small book, relatively speaking, compared to the size of Rigveda Samhita. For example, Yaska will take up one word, Vaishwanara Kasmat, Deva Kasmat, like that, Indra Kasmat. Why the particular word Indra is called Indra? Why Vaishwanara is called Vaishwanara? Why Deva is called Deva? So he gives different meaning. Devodhanadva, Dyodhanava, Deepanava, Dusthanava, Bhavati. The 4 different possible explanations as to the etymological meaning of Deva Shabda. Like that, Yaska's Nirukta. It's a relatively small book. It's not a huge work or anything. The first attempt by human mind to write something like a dictionary or a thesaurus, historically speaking, going back to 6th century BC, Yaska's Nirukta. So, and it is the Yaska who first posits the idea that the absolute reality should remain without any change, which is Shatvikara Atita, beyond 6 changes. And according to Advaitins, Brahman is beyond all the 6 changes. But Ramanuja's Vishnu Narayana evolves and becomes this world and also becomes different jivas. So the Paramarthika Satta as defined by Shankaracharya is not acceptable. Vyavaharika Satta, Pradibhasika Satta differentiation that you find in Advaita is also not acceptable for Ramanuja. Vyavaharika Satta means common sense experience, something that exists that we take for something real in practical world. I mean, the world, everything that we live, Vyavahar means from a common sense point of view, it is real. But it is not absolutely real because it changes. The utility changes, its shape and size and form and everything will change. So it is not Paramarthika. It is not absolutely real, but it is only Vyavaharika. It is empirical reality. The Pradibhasika, conceptual reality. For example, when you superimpose a snake on a rope, the snake idea is only in your mind. It is not absolutely unreal because the snake exists in the forest or the zoo. You have seen the snake and the memory is still fresh in your mind. You superimpose that snakeness, so to speak, the snake idea, on a piece of rope which somehow resembles the snake in its form and shape. So Smriti Rupa Adhyasa means you superimpose upon it. That also Ramanuja will not accept. I mean the differentiation accept. And also asat, which according to something which cannot even be conceived of as existing. For example, Gandharva Nagara, a city, a child may have the wrong notion that when he looks at the sky in the evening, walking in the evening when the sun is setting in the west, brilliant sunlight, he may think, we look at the clouds, which golden color, he may think there is a city, there is a shop, there are many shops and streets in the city, in the sky, which may be just an illusion, so to speak, which child may believe, but it is totally unrealistic. It cannot even be conceived of. Even the very idea itself is mutually contradictory. If it is Gandharva Nagara, if it is a city, then it cannot be in the sky. If it is in the sky, it cannot be a city, like that. Vandhyaputra, like means the son of a barren woman, both cannot be real. So the very expression contradicts its plausible reality. So that is the Vedantic view, Advaitic view. Ramanuja doesn't bother about that. That's why frequently you find in Ramanuja system and Madhva system and Vallabhacharya, Nimbarka, Baladeva system, everywhere you find, there's a great problem in understanding the true meaning of avidya and maya as defined and clearly explained in Advaita Vedanta. So Ramanuja there is a well-known book called Saptanupapattivada, means 7 untenables according to Ramanuja system, 7 types of objections that the Viśiṣṭādvaitins raised against Advaita, mostly centering around the misconceptions of the idea of the concept of avidya, maya or mithyatvam as understood in Vedanta. For example, Ramanuja says, Sadasatta anadhikarnatva mithyatvam. Sadasatta anadhikarnatvam va mithyatvam. It's a definition of mithyatvam in Panchapadika, Padmapada's Panchapadika. And also you find in Panchapadika, Vivarana Prakashatmayadi also goes on explaining something which is the basis of or the support of both real and unreal, both. Such a thing cannot exist. But still we feel that. So something that we eventually realize to be unreal, but forced to admit to be real before we understand the true fact, before we realize that Brahman is only absolute reality, we can't help being under the delusion that this world is actually real. Conceptually, as an intellectual idea, we may understand the unreality of the world. But still there will be nagging doubt unless we actually practice spiritual disciplines and experience that Brahman is only reality. So, but still we know that it is going to be really unreal. So that's the idea behind. So, just I wanted to mention, and there is also a reason for it. For example, in Ramanuja system and Madhva system, especially in the writings of post-Ramanuja writings and also even Madhva system itself, which Madhvacharya says, Nacha Sunyavadinaha Sakashat Vailakshannim Mayavadinaha. So Mayavadinaha Sunyavadinaha Sakashat Na Vailakshannim. So Madhvacharya says, this he comes in the well-known book called Tattwamayanandaji. It is a well-known book of course written by Madhvacharya himself. So he, for example, says, I mean the effect of not being able to understand the true meaning of avidya and maya. Shankaracharya just used the word maya to explain the mystery of something that we experience for all practical purposes. But eventually we realize it is actually unreal when we realize the absolute reality. Till we realize the absolute reality, we may think this name and form, etc., may be real. To give an example, let us say a normal person who doesn't think, who doesn't keep in mind the fact that all the different ornaments are made of the same gold, may imagine that a necklace is different from a ring. A ring is different from some other golden ornaments. He may think because the shape is different, different name, maybe price also will be different. Utility, vyavahara, in the utility level also things may be different. But a goldsmith will understand that everything, all these are made of gold. Goldsmith is somebody like a Brahmajnani, an over a Brahman. He will not wrongly assume that a golden ring is totally different from a golden necklace. But somebody going to a jewelry shop may imagine for some time these things are different. Because these different ornaments are worn or used for in a different way. But the goldsmith will not care for that. He values only the quality of gold, and same gold is used for manufacturing different golden ornaments. Brahmajnani is like a goldsmith or a jewelry seller, jewelry merchant who knows the value of everything and who knows that everything is made of the same gold. So I mentioned already, Ramanuja doesn't accept the Vivartavada of Advaitins, Ramanuja accepts the Parinamavada. In Ramanuja's system, we have to remember, and this is the first lesson we have to keep in mind. It's called Tattvatrayam, means three fundamental categories, which I already mentioned, but I want to elaborate a little further. Three fundamental categories. One is Ishvara, and Ramanuja's idea of Ishvara, Saguna Brahman, Vishnu Narayana, and that is the supreme category. That's the only independent category. And this Vishnu Narayana, the God idea, has got different attributes. And the second category is Chit, Jivas. Jivas are dependent upon Ishvara. Ishvara is the only independent category. Jivas are dependent upon Ishvara because Jivas constitute amsha, parts. So you call amsha, amsi sambandha, it's called. Amsin is Ishvara, amsha, part is Jiva and Jagat. So Sesha, Seshi, Amsha, Amsi, like that will Niyamya, Niyamaga, like that, all these we will discuss in course of time. So God or Ishvara is only independent entity. And all the jivas and Jagat, all different objects in the world, are the results of parinama, the change of Ishvara into all these different evolutes. Through parinama or change. That is a real change, not apparent change. So it is technically called Sarira, Sariri, Sesha, Seshi, Amsha, Amsi, and Niyamya, Niyamaga, Raksha, Rakshaka, means all other entities are being preserved and protected by Rakshaka, Vishnu Narayana. And the honor of the Sharira, Sharirin is Ishvara. Sesha is a part. Niyanta is the controller. What is controlled constitutes jivas and jagat. The controller is Ishvara. Ishvara is Antaryami, is the indweller, living in everyone as the indweller. So, the Ishvara is only independent category. Now, there are just a few very important principles which Ramanuja wrote a number of books, as mentioned, almost 9 books he wrote, including one which is used for daily parayana, daily practices. Total 8 important philosophical books and one minor book which is frequently used for daily practices and rituals. So, as I mentioned, Ramanuja accepts both unity, oneness on the one hand, plurality, different jivas, different living souls, and also different objects in this external world, in the Jagat. So, in other words, Ramanuja accepts oneness, plurality, and also a combination of both oneness and also plurality, Bheda and Abheda. Why Bheda and Abheda? Because Ishvara is Antaryami. Ishvara is the source of evolution. Jivas and Jagat constitute evolutes, the result of evolution. So in that respect, we have to admit the reality of plurality. Because Shankaracharya gives certain fundamental definitions that we should keep in mind to understand Advaitins' view of the absolute reality and the relative Vyavaharika Satta. That which remains without a change in the past, present and future, that which remains our experience as the same in the Jagra, Swapna, Sushupti states, waking, dream and deep sleep states. That which remains without any change, like Jayade, Asti, Vardhade, Viparinamade, Abhakshyade, Vinashyadi, coming to existence, existing, growing, evolving, decaying and dying out. All these changes. Without any of these change, if something exists, that alone can be the absolute reality. And that, according to Shankaracharya, is Brahman. It is called Ajam, unborn. And therefore, it is Avyayam. It is without any change, eternal. That definition doesn't apply in Viśiṣṭādvaita system. So RāMānuja system is more realistic. Shankaracharya system is also realistic. But realism in Shankara's system doesn't affect his definition of the absolute reality. But in RāMānuja's system, in order to accommodate realism, his absolute reality also becomes conditioned or qualified by plurality, Chit and Achit Viśiṣṭā, Chit, Achit, Viśiṣṭādvaita. So in one context, well-known book, Vedartha Sangraha. It's a very famous book, Vedartha Sangraha. Later on, I will discuss some important topics from RāMānuja Bhashya, Sudarsana Suris on commentary. Now we will come to smaller works of RāMānuja. It's called, one is Vedartha Sangraha. So in Vedartha Sangraha, RāMānuja beautifully explains this in a very simple language. He says, Sarva Sharirataya Sarva Prakara Brahma Eva Avasthidam Idi Abheda Samarthitaha. So Sarva Sharirataya Sarva Prakaram Brahma Eva Avasthidam Idi Abheda Samarthitaha. Means we accept, we believe in unity because Brahman alone exists. And all other things, like different jivas, different living objects, and also different non-living objects in this empirical world, they are all entities which are exist like the different modes, different aspects of Brahman. So Brahman is the one reality. Everything else is a mode of Brahman, is an aspect of Brahman. So that's why he Sarva Sharirataya Sarva Prakara Brahmeva Avasthidam. Brahman alone exists as these innumerable entities, the external world, the mountains, ocean, rivers, Jagat, empirical world, and also different living beings, all human beings. In all human beings, there is Antaryami, Brahman. But again, in Advaita Vedanta, the plurality is a vision, a realization just before you reach the ultimate enlightenment. When you reach the ultimate enlightenment, you go beyond, you transcend the experience of plurality. That transcending doesn't exist, it doesn't happen in Ramanuja system. Ramanuja, that's why it is a blending of extreme realism with idealism, monistic idealism, blended with pluralistic realism. You can say monotheistic realism. In one way, that is also true. That's why he sarva sharirataya sarva prakaram brahmayeva. Brahman, Vishnu Narayana alone exists in the form of all these different living beings, all the jivas. That's one thing. So, we accept Advaita, oneness. And Ramanuja says, we also accept plurality. We also accept diversity. And there he says, Ekameva Brahma Nana Bhuda Chit Achit Vastu Prakaram Nanatvena Avasthidam Iti Bheda Abhedu. So, we also accept unity and plurality together. Bheda Abhedu Divachana. We accept not only Abheda, as mentioned earlier, unity, we also accept plurality. Why? Because both Brahman as all these physical and spiritual entities as his aspects. So all these are different aspects of Brahman. Therefore, that absolute reality is qualified by plurality. Ekameva Brahma Nanabhuda Chit Achit Vastu Prakaram. Chit, jivas, achit, empirical objects in the external world, jagat, nanatvena avasthidam. They exist in a pluralistic manner, in a pluralistic fashion. Iti bheda abhedo. So, we accept plurality. And then we accept a combination of bheda and abheda, plurality and unity together. So, he says, Achit vastunascha, chit vastunascha, ishwarasya susarupa bhava vailakshanyat asankarat cha bheda samarthitaha. So we uphold plurality. Why? But Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, they are mutually distinct and they're essentially in their substantive manner, they are distinct. So we accept Bheda, we accept Abheda, we accept a combination of both Bheda and Abheda, but not in the way as taught by Baladeva in his commentary on Brahma Sutra. It's called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system, where it's called Achintya Bheda Abheda. It's different, because here Ramanuja says the same reality, it is only conditioned by Chit and Achit. Reality is one, Brahman, Vishnu Narayana. But the Vishnu Narayana exists in all living different beings. So, conditioned by plurality, conditioned by Chit Achit entities. That's why Chit Achit Vastunaha Ishwarasya Susarupa Bhava Vailakshanyat. Because every entity in this external world, Achit Vastunaha, and every Jiva, Chit Vastunaha, Vailakshanyat. They are distinct and different from Ishvara, from monotheistic reality, and they don't mix together. Therefore, Bheda, distinction or diversity, plurality is also accepted in Ramanuja's system. It's a very, that's why I mentioned Ramanuja's system is more realistic. So I should repeat what I said at some point of time. That is, Swami Vivekananda expounding Indian philosophy in modern times from a spiritual perspective and from a spiritual evolution perspective, we can see that we evolve from Viśiṣṭādvaita to Advaita. We don't reject Viśiṣṭādvaita, only we transcend Viśiṣṭādvaita. But maybe a classical example I can give may not be exactly comparable, but to give an example, in the Christian mystical tradition, for example, if you read the teachings of Meister Eckhart, and if you read the teachings of saints like Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Francis, you find, or maybe in the and some other mystical writers, when they communicate with the God in their contemplative manner, at some point they seem to have merged with the reality, but still they do not articulate that they've realized their unity and oneness with God. You can't expect that from St. Francis of Assisi, St. Teresa of Avila, or anyone. But only in Meister Eckhart you find a clear articulation of the idea that the absolute reality at the monistic level goes beyond any kind of attributes, definitions, explanations, or descriptions. So, RāMāNUJā'S system is a natural stage from where one will reach Advaita when you transcend without rejecting. That's from a spiritual perspective, you don't say one system is wrong, the other alone is right. It will be stupid for anyone to say that you should go to Harvard to get education. What you study in primary school is all wrong. Or what you study in an ordinary college is wrong. Unless you get a PhD or Harvard, everything is false. No. You don't reject the previous stage. You outgrow, you go beyond. This is from spiritual perspective. So you don't put dividing lines and boundaries between different systems. It's an important thing to remember. Spinoza's system roughly can be called an approximation, coming very close to RāMāNUJā'S devotional theism, so to speak. And another very important criticism that you frequently find, and this comes from a school of cutthroat Advaitins, who may not fully accommodate the real teaching, it's very comprehensive teaching of Shankaracharya, who accommodates the highest form of devotion into his system. I mentioned this earlier. Maicha ananya yogena bhaktihi avibhijarini vivikta desha sevittum anabhirjana samsadi. It comes in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 10th or 11th verse. Here's a definition, a description of the pure, unwavering, single-minded devotion to God. It is called Avibhijarani Bhakti, unwavering devotion. So in this commentary, Shankaracharya goes on describing this unwavering devotion. Na vyabhijarana shila, avibhijarini, like that, nirmala, shuddha, and so on. Then he says, ananya yogena bhajanam bhaktihi. I mean, without any wavering, without any distraction, any dissipation, if you focus your mind on a single ideal, that devotion is bhakti. And that bhakti, when it becomes completely free from any kind of wavering or distraction, it is called avibhijarani bhakti, which in RāMāNUJā'S system may be called prapatti or sharanagati, total self-surrender. And then Shankaracharya, after explaining the pure devotion, he says sacha jnanam. And that bhakti is also the highest Advaitic experience, called jnana. Now, those who don't take care to understand this, they will tell you that RāMāNUJā'S system is kind of slavery. You consider yourself to be a servant of God, which is quite beneath your dignity. So such criticisms, actually there were some criticisms. So Ramanuja, actually there are some important statements in Ramanuja's own system. Most probably, Ramanuja must have got these ideas because he was himself a student of Yadava Prakasha, who belonged to this category of the cutthroat Advaitins, who won't have anything to do with devotion or puja or anything. I mean, so sometimes such people will consider total Sharanagati, self-surrender, as some kind of a subservience, subordination, servitude to God. So Ramanuja deals with this problem. And this again comes in Vedartha Sangraha. He says, Atmabhimano yadrishaka tadanuguna eva purushartha pratitihi. What he says is, that which an individual actually sincerely pursues as his ultimate spiritual goal depends upon what he conceives himself to be. So, what he conceives, how he defines himself, that decides his highest spiritual goal. So you have two choices. One choice, you can be a slave to matter. You can be a slave to your own senses and sense objects, sense desires. So that, and then frequently we try to define and understand independence as some kind of a total dependence on material things, but we are not dependent upon God. We have to be dependent upon something. If we don't make ourselves dependent upon some higher ideal, some higher spiritual ideal, the only alternative is we'll be dependent upon our own sense pleasures. So the ideal that material independence is happiness is a wrong idea, because that is actually slavery. So when you actually make yourself dependent upon God, you become independent of the clutches of your own senses, your own mind, and the sense objects. So when a person conceives himself to be other than his senses, I'm not dependent upon my mind and my senses and my sense pleasures. I'm independent of them. How does this happen? When we become dependent upon some higher ideal. Atmabhimano yadrishaka tadirguna eva purushartha pratitihi. So what is our own idea of Atmabhimana? Yadrishaka Atmabhimana tadrisha eva mittadguna eva. Accordingly, a purushartha pratiti. That will be our idea of the ultimate goal. Purushartha means the highest goal in life. If we consider ourselves to be something other than a slave of our own senses, then we will look for a higher ideal, a higher purushartha. And that means we become independent of depending upon our senses. When we become dependent upon God or some higher ideal. It's a very psychologically very logical interpretation. So people who think, I don't believe in God, I believe in some kind of spirit, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. Actually, many of them, they declare the freedom from God. I don't care for a dictator God. Then who would we care for? We care for money, rich, material things. So some kind of dependence is unavoidable for every living being. The best way for us to become independent of the clutches of our own senses, slavery to our own senses, is to become dependent upon something higher, some higher ideal. And according to Ramanuja, dependence on God is the way to become free from dependence upon material things. It's a very, very logically very, very important. And then I want to give listeners an idea of different approaches in Vedanta, in the RāMāNUJā system, and also in the Brahma Sutras of Shankaracharya. So RāMāNUJā wrote this well-known book. It is called Vedanta Saraha. Actually, you find a very brief exposition of Brahma Sutra. So it's a very RāMāNUJā says, for example, just to give an example, some sample demonstration, because people have to spend long years to study Sri Bhashyam, which is very, very abstract but very important canonical work to anyone who wants to make a serious study of RāMāNUJā's system. So just for example, one sutra, I just give you an example, Janmadhyasya Yataha. It is one of the earliest sutras. Asya Vichitra Chit Ajit Misrasya Vivasthita Sukadukkhopabhogimya Jagado Janmasthidilaya Yata Tad Brahma Idi Pradipādayati Sudirityarthaka Yato va imani bhudani jayante ena jatani jivandi yet prayante visam visandi tad vijijñāsasva tad Brahma. It is quoted from Taittiriya Upanishad, from Krishna Yajurveda. Shankaracharya also quotes the same mantra while expounding this second sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha. So the point is, from what ultimate origin the entire creation comes into existence. Asya Vichitra Chit Ajit Misrasya Vyavasthita Sukadukkhopapagammyasya Jagado Janmasthitilayayatah. So the point is, it's a simple thing. RāMāNUJā says, Sutre Yata iti Hedu Panchami is a reference to Panchami Vibhakti. You find Shankaracharya also is the same. Janistitilayanam sadharanatva janihedutvam cha nimitto upadana rupam vivakshitam. So RāMāNUJā says, from whom, Janmadhyasya Yataha, Yataha asya Janmadi means, from what reality, from what origin this entire creation comes into existence. Origin, existence and dissolution. So his casuality in protection includes his being efficient cause as well as material cause. So RāMāNUJā will explain the same thing. The only difference is, in this commentary, RāMāNUJā would say that this origin is one Saguna, Sakara, Savishesha, Sagala, Kalyana, Gunanidhi, an absolute reality in the form of a supreme being who is a repository of all auspicious qualities and characteristics, who is compassionate, who is the Nimitta Karanam and Upadana Karanam, both material cause and also efficient cause of this world, through evolution, that Saguna Sakara Savishesha Brahman in the form of Vishnu Narayana evolves and becomes this world, and this world and the different jivas cannot exist independent of the Vishnu Narayana. In Shankara's system, his conclusion is something little different. So he says, Kim punastad Vedanta vakyam sutrena iha Dilashidam Pruvai Varuniki Varunam Pitaram Upasara Adhihi Bhava Brahmeti Dupakramya Yatova Imani Bhudani Jayande Enajatani Jivandi Prenda Visam Visandi. Shankaracharya also quotes this, what is called Varuni Vidya in Taittiriya Upanishad, where small little boy goes to his father. That little boy's name is Bhrigu, his father's name is Varuna, and he asks his father, teach him Brahma Vidya. Adhihi Bhagavo Brahmedi, please teach me Brahman. And the teacher, father, tells him, go and meditate. From where all these different objects come into existence. All these different trees and mountains and valleys and panchapranas, mind and so on. Where do they come from? Where do they exist? Just what they all get dissolved. And that is the origin. What is that origin? Ananda deva ikhalu imani bhudani jayante anandena jadani jivandi anandam praindavi samvisanti, etc. Then Shankaracharya will say, Anyanapi evam jatiyagani vakyani nitya suddha buddha mukta svabhava sarvajna surupa karana vishayani udahartavyani. So it all tells you that the real cause of this creation, this world, is nothing but Nitya Suddha Buddha Mukta Svabhava Ishvara, which is Nirguna Niragara Nirvishesha Brahman. That's all. So Ramanuja interprets this world as actually evolving from a Saguna Sagara Sabhisesha Ishvara, from a monotheistic God with attributes, names and forms and auspicious qualities. Shankaracharya says this entire existence appears to have become evolved, appears to have become manifest, like the clay appears to have become pots and pans, etc. Not real, no parinama, but vivarta appears to have become. Transfiguration is the English word. Transformation is parinama, transfiguration is vivarta. So this change has not happened. Just like clay pot has not become different from clay, you break it, goes back to clay. But the oil cannot go back to oil seed. Example of parinama or real change, transformation, transfiguration. The example is, for transfiguration, the example is the gold appears to have become different golden ornaments. The earth or clay appears to have become different utensils, different pots and pans made of the same clay. Like that, this world appears to have become Vivarta from Brahman, Advaita Vedanta, the Saguna Brahman, Ishvara, Vishnu Narayana, really has evolved into different objects in this world and also different jivas in this world. From a spiritual perspective, you can believe in Viśiṣṭādvaita, it is wonderful. But as we evolve in spiritual life, we never reject Viśiṣṭādvaita, we go beyond Viśiṣṭādvaita. That's the idea behind. So thank you, we can have interaction, you are most welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. David, if you could please unmute yourself and proceed with your question. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
For some spiritual take Nirvikalpa Samadhi, for Madhava and Ramanuja, they both seem try to get Savikalpa Samadhi. Is there a different sort of realization that each of those dualistic systems come to?
Yeah, okay. Nirvikalpa Samadhi as understood in Advaita can be equated with Prapatti as understood in RāMāNUJA system. In RāMāNUJA system, the highest stage of enlightenment is Prapatti in its sadhya form. Prapatti or Saranagati or self-surrender has two dimensions. One, the experience dimension, the ultimate goal. The other one, the spiritual discipline dimension, so to speak. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi is fundamentally a concept in Advaita Vedanta. mean, Ramanuja, because in Nirvikalpa Samadhi denotes you are losing your total identity and becoming one with the universal reality, Brahman. At that level of experience. This one may have even when you are living this world. But it's called Jivan Mukti. And when this body is gone, it becomes Videha Mukti. You are no more reborn, you are no more born again, and you become one with the Supreme Reality. In Ramanuja system, it's more like Sri Ramakrishna says, you like a insect that falls into the honey pot, it cannot enjoy honey. But that's the ultimate purpose. Of course, an insect will die when it falls in a honey pot. So the comparison has its own problems. Every drishtanta has its own, every comparison, every metaphor has some limitations. So the point is, in the Ramanuja system, the highest reach is Prapatya Sharanagati in Sadhya form, where you realize your total identification through self-surrender. So identification through self-surrender, different from identification as understood in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where your individual identity gets dissolved in the universal reality. When in Ramanuja system, you always remain distinct and different. So I mentioned this in the last class, Sayujyam is the highest goal in the Ramanuja system. Sayujyam is not total identity with Ishvara, God, but you reach the same realm where God is living, Salokyam, Samipyam, living close proximity with God, Sarupyam, having the same form, and Sayujyam. Sayujyam is the highest experience of closeness, identity with the absolute reality without losing your own individuality. If you lose your individuality, so Brahmavi Brahmaiva Bhavati, Brahmajnani, knower of Brahman, becomes one with Brahman itself. That is only in Advaita, not in Viśiṣṭādvaita. So Ramanuja's system is the highest supreme school in devotional tradition, Sayujyam. So Sayujyam means you go beyond all this. So first stage is Salokyam, you are in Vishnu Lokas, Vishnu realm. Samipyam, your close proximity with Vishnu. And Sarupyam, you have the same form. And Sayujyam. Remember, there is one ideal, it's called Sashti in Bhagavata Purana, which actually denotes you become one with the Supreme Reality, except that you don't have the power to create this world, Srishti Siddhi Laya. Because Ishvara has the power to create this world, to sustain this world, and to the point of dissolution. But in Ramanuja system, you reach the highest Supreme Reality, but not total identity with the God. That's the idea behind it. Total identity means Sashti, or Sashti doesn't happen. It's okay. In Ramanuja.
In Madhava system, would they also, in terms of the Samadhi experience, would Madhava's system, you have Savikalpa Samadhi, and also in Ramanuja's, Savikalpa Samadhi is the highest, so both of those would have a similar realization?
The Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, these terms are used in Patanjali Yoga system and also in Vedanta system. Ramanuja uses different categories and different terms. Roughly one can say Savikalpa Samadhi can be called the equivalent of Sayujyam. We can more or less say that. Another important thing, what I mentioned earlier, from a spiritual perspective only we can really make a comparison. Philosophically, we will never be able to reach any kind of reconciliation. But from a spiritual perspective, reconciliation naturally happens within our mind, our heart, because part of our experience. So I've often seen, interesting I would say, I've been teaching this for many years before coming out to the US. And I have seen this when you have some discussions, the person who puts all these questions, especially when I was teaching the training center where monks are being trained, many of these monks or would-be monks, novitiates, who take deep interest in these philosophical systems, gradually they stop asking these questions when they slowly become more focused on their meditation or japa, spiritual discipline, contemplation. At the beginning, they want to show their smartness, so to speak. Why Ramanuja says, why not this, why not that? So if you patiently listen to them and explain to them, they won't be easily convinced of this. But as months go by, the more sincere among them, the more focused among them, who ask these questions, slowly start asking fewer and fewer questions. That's because as we start our journey, questions naturally get dissolved. It's important. From a dialectical, polemical, philosophical, metaphysical level to spiritual level. So that's why often when we discuss these, I often use the example. Many people who become extremely aggressive and assertive, no, Sri Ramakrishna said, RāMāNUJA said, Radha Shankara said, all that. If you listen closely to their arguments and words, especially the aggressive tone they use, it shows they are not going anywhere. They are just like standing in a bus stop. They're planning, where does this bus go? Where does the other? Where does the train go? They are not booked any ticket. They are not going to go anywhere. They are sitting on a bus stop or train station. They have no real plan to go anywhere. So you may sit in a railway station, a platform, watching different trains going to different destinations, or in an airport you may sit and see hundreds of flights going different places. Where do they go? What happens when they travel? We have not booked a ticket. We have not spent any money. We can do that. So, but on the other hand, when we actually go and buy a ticket, when we actually plan to go somewhere, then we start wondering less and less, This is true in spiritual life also. But remember, discussions, even vigorous discussions, do have a great significance, because we are connecting our mind into something sublime, something transcendental, something higher. So slowly when we do that, gradually we find our questions become less and less distracted and become more and more focused. This is natural evolution. Like that, we do not reject Viśiṣṭādvaita, we go beyond Viśiṣṭādvaita. And this going beyond doesn't happen at the dialectical level. It happens only at the level of our spiritual contemplation, meditation, internal life. When that happens, questions get self-destructed, self-destroyed, self-dissolved in themselves. Questions cease to be questions. They don't get an answer. They cease to be questions. There are no more questions. That's what happens. Okay, thank you. Thank you. In fact, I should thank Mr. David, because some of your questions really have helped me to explain many things which I would not have explained otherwise. So maybe people like you who ask these questions are a great blessing to any session, in fact. Thank you. Yeah.
I was looking at David's face. I don't think he's discouraged from asking future questions.
No, you should never discourage. Kindly don't discourage. Okay, thank you.
Thank
My
you.
prayer should be, though, may all my questions be answered.
Yeah, I can only answer the verbal level, but really a focused, serious interest in higher philosophy is one stage in our evolution, really speaking. It's an important stage in our evolution. Thank you for the questions. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. There is a hand raised by another intrepid questioner, Sri Ram.
Thank you, please. Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe the lokas that you know of, they are all temporary. The Vishnu loka, the Sayujyam, is permanent, or is it when you live out your accumulated, you need to come back to the Bhuloka?
Yeah, no. In fact, after Sayujyam, you are not reborn. No. After Sayujyam, the highest result of Prapatti, one is never reborn. That's what the system says, yeah.
You will be eternally in Vishnu Loka?
Yeah, you become, that's why you get the same form as Vishnu, Sairupyam, and Sairupyam live in the same world, and after Sayujyam, one is never reborn. Of course, there are many stories in the Bhagavata Purana and in RāMANUJA'S own. Ramanuja accepted the Nalayira Prabandham in the 4,000 text in the Tamil Arvas tradition. So, many of these great saints were the exalted devotees who have reached Sayujyam and born in this world to enrich and to serve the world. Many great saints, according to Vaishnava tradition, are great saints who have reached Sayujyam and born for the good of others.
Avatara.
Yeah. Not avatara. Avatara is a different term used in different context. They were all exalted saints. But they are not forced to be reborn. Sometimes great names like Narada, Shuka, many like that, if you look at the Puranic history. See, Hinduism is such a vast body of subjects, Yeah. Thank you.
Maharaj, earlier on, there was a question. There was a mention, at the risk of being stuck at a way earlier station on the train line. You mentioned the grammarian Yaska and Nirukta.
Yeah, Nirukta.
And he's one of the great Sanskrit grammarians in history. So early on, certainly the earliest. But is it crucial to understand the work of the grammarians in order to interpret the Vedas?
Yeah, Yaska's work is important because it is historically the second important effort to interpret and expound Vedic mantras, Vedic terms. The first one is Vaidika Nikhandu. Before Yaska, there was Nikhandu literally means dictionary, something along those lines. But Yaska, the Nikhandu is not available in its full form. But the most important work that is available in its full form is Yaska's Niruktam. There was a Vaidika Nikhandu. Nikhandu in Sanskrit means dictionary. This means dictionary. So Yaska's book is important because it's historically the first effort that's available to us today in full form, is the first effort to explain the words. He mostly gives different alternate meanings, actually. So why this word is Vishwanara Kasmad, Vishwanara Naiditi Vaishwanara. Like that he goes on explaining. So historically it's very important.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just going to thank all the questioners, and there were no other hands up, and there were no questions on the YouTube. So thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you so much. Thank you, every one of you. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Guruji.
Thank you.